Oh, the names of the people of the sciences from off those locations. Forgiveness is because there's a breaching method with guilt, and if we don't keep the breaching method observed when we make convictions. When people make observations and they make convictions and they say it's that, but they leave out all these things like foreign policy. The Constitution unabridged is a foreign policy. How and why the Constitution was forced to be entertained, abridged, and not one individual voice, even as a majority of people, even as everyone together was allowed to demonstrate all the abridgments, is relative to how the campuses were left A through Z. Campuses that are functioned by the republic for which we stand, which has been criminally foreign influence version of itself since before religious messengers were born. No one has addressed properly the relativity / hyper-relativity note per science we could use to discern it needs to refer to the hyper-relativity too, because there is that. In other words, I explain that in my other videos, in the live streams. The Facebook page of Fox Connecticut News and the ones associated with Judge Napolitano before they terminated their roles with him, they had to hide things with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in Hartford, Connecticut, with a bunch of people like named Mendez, involved also with people named DeMoro. And one of them looked exactly like an Aaron Mate. I never had a class with him. They try to make they look exceptions with a summer school class. Is involved with Mr. Neville and the two other people they put in that summer school class. Increasingly involved with home break-ins and falsified police reports with police forms involved with that, and courts' family members, including judges' family members and prosecutors' family members, little kids involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids proven years apart, and more then and now involved. Other natures of organized crimes. When they bring up the subjects, then they pretend people don't speak clearly. I was attached to fake conversations with themselves and with others with WFSB. WFSB in Rocky Hill also has roles with the same names, intercities, and their sources. And these are the sources of WTNH, the fake ties to me, fake nature ties to me, and brought their kids involved. An O'Neill family with the intelligence community is also an educator with West Hartford campuses. And these are also names next to the campuses, intercities and intra-cities, involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders. They film someone walking next to people and then pretend they had the conversations. And with complete strangers like a Joshua Julian. He's one of the ones involved with a whole bunch of people tied to people that I never saw on a campus, involved with predicate acts with people on my street. I never saw him on my street. He was trying to pretend I partied with him. With my neighbor, I used to never hang out with my neighbor. They did a little trick and timed me when I was going to walk in and with a break hello. That's the only reason I went to a prom. With him and his day, I don't even know her name. I never had a word of conversation with her. And I didn't say anything to what people communicate confessions. And they demonstrate them. People involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members and their neighbors and their lawyer, Robert Chevalier, involved too, right next to Fox Connecticut News, right before a 2006 district court case in Connecticut that has a Brian Silver and other prosecutors and victims advocates with New Britain Superior Court increasingly involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. And now they're pretending it's because they're pretending they're legitimately pretending to be criminal enterprises. One's with name Kerr and DeMoro, and they say they share Heather Hansen, and they have other names on Church Street. A whole bunch of people on Church Street involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with the businesses and houses next to Hartford Hospital, and with the people at it. Involved too with all kinds of lawyer scams, judges, prosecutors, their family members putting fake transcripts in databases. In other words, the reason we have foreign policies, in other words, A through Z are knaves. They want to pretend and speak about economics through and as systems tactical ulterior from that value/value progression that is generating totally different species bodies made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies and from ours, which is a different species body made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. So we could discern all group differences generated by it, or we're using a bridged system, /S. All the voicings for humanity have been reliant upon criminally foreign influence, fact, truth, nature, quality, aspects, nature, uses of ism, and in nature debate itself, pretended legitimate. Not one sane, formal description of calm, or aggressive syntax descriptions of American foreign policy has stood. We don't even have James Madison allowed to be understood. We have it replaced. They have their uses of our founders' words, leaving out what they had to have to classify for themselves about why and about how nobody had free speech. Even now, there were more than 13 states, and there were roles with all kinds of abuses of everyone's self and everyone else to an extent. Everyone had to pretend other to it to an extent, otherwise be sentenced. That was sustained against Native Americans. And it was sustained on them through people that had already been sustained upon since before religious messengers were born, without free speech to an extent, because there was already a syntactical possession / hyper possession of the ancient sciences that nature itself shows us as most probably and demonstrably having been from off them, influenced, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to defend themselves in ways they didn't know how to do it properly. And in defenses of that, doing it anyway, more and more they were taken incapable of affording to be, even in the mouths of other people, short words proper by the sciences, not by the identity the sciences share. It's the same one generating totally different species bodies of a whole bunch of individual bodies to show us its individual identity of value / value progression, to show us where we could discern and how we could discern that identity of value progression. That same one generating why and how we have different color eyes and same color eyes at the same time. The same one communicating to us about difference. It is also communicating to us the difference between taxes and values. It is also teaching us the difference between law and value and nature. See, but in other words, law readings, we're supposed to address why there's a witch trials place, for example, right next to the Webb House, a founding location, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Then and now they have syntax and research that has replaced what our founders communicated for those founding locations and the rest of them. And note where and how slavery was entrenched, sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly, northern colonies and southern colonies, more than 13, and roles with it had already been sustained. Therefore, everyone had already hurt themselves and others. All voicings of humanity had already been faked and entertained that way, otherwise sensed. We have to pay attention to the breaching method that was entrenched against every human difference. To keep measuring and maintain voicings for humanity anyway, for example. This breaching method measures and maintains at countries A through Z, at campuses A through Z. Locations, areas, and states are the only ones that can operate the names of countries A through Z. So there are people with the name Demoro and Cololo. Increasingly, they brought up the name Napolitano with them. And my campuses have they're educated. The educators of those people have roles with them. Criminally foreign influence uses of the campuses, and a whole bunch of roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and their collusions that including medical and fire campuses, and with Russians. So even if that Aaron Mate is not related to a Joe DeMoro, or a John DeMoro, or a Paul DeMoro, or a Tony DeMoro, And there's a Paula DeMauro too, involved with people named McCord, involved with all sides of criminal and civil cases, including with a Mike Pandolf, increasingly involved with people all along Park Street in the corners on different ends of it, involved with the intelligence community, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and leaders of kids, increasingly people from intelligence families near me, that at Trinity College in Central Connecticut State University. Trinity College is in Hartford, Connecticut. Central Connecticut State University is in New Britain, Connecticut. Inter and intra cities, they cover up lie progressions by making confessions from strangers. So we're going to observe how the breaching method uses confessions and used confessions before the church, before the time of Jesus Christ, in the form of everyone blaming other things, others, ourselves for what it caused, and in defenses of that for other motivations, nature's needs, interests. It correctly knew it could propagate to self-cultivated, self-valued roles. Right where no one self-values that. People say, "Oh, I know," like right where you guys self-value, preventing people from using the hyper-evidential of how we have black people's rights of eyes and how we are offensively pretended free speech by styles, needs, and natures of logic. What some Mendez police with the Wethersfield Police Department, they attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and then as an adult with their educators at the Wethersfield Police Department. Their collusions with Wethersfield Police, and as one, they attach adults and kids to fake conversations with themselves, and adults, and then as adults too, fake conversations in databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties to Wethersfield Police that are involved with Harper, next to Fox Connecticut News, involved with digital crimes with their Facebook pages, and with sexual and medical offenders of kids. Facebook has collusions with New Britain Superior Court with rape threats before the principal child abuser was proven. I recorded him involved with worse than they put him in jail for, reportedly for upskirt pictures. There are increasingly people with shopping centers and malls that are involved with predicate acts in my street, and intra cities. And what I recorded them doing is trying to cover up, because they have intelligence families that already had roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases. And the interbranch and intelligence putting the same sequence shifts, hiding use/s of their roles with all these other different countries in the news, and their roles with natures of industries that are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, incapable of defending their syntax and their nature and their styles of it, and of purporting to be, let alone to protract short words proper regarding the most serious things like World Trade Center predicate acts. These are increasingly people with the name DeMauro, and many from New Britain Superior Court have Elm Streets and Wethersfield and Rocky Hill and conjunctions to them and to that, like Route 3, which is conjunctive to the state judicial branch offices. They are increasingly involved with wire and digital crime acts and methods, falsified police reports, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and people with the name DeMauro and Oliveri and others. They recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirm. They have the families that live there and people with the businesses near there involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, pretending passions and emotions to behavior racketeering. These are increasingly people with the businesses and houses next to Hartford Hospital through time. One's named DeMauro, and where it is now too, in Rocky Hill, and conjunctions to it and to that. And people, a Joshua Stryker and a Joe DeMauro was recorded and is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed between campuses, intercities, including by students and teachers at Trinity College and at Central Connecticut State University from before I went there. These are people involved with former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, his code, various natures of proven federal criminals since before they were caught. And their syntax with Joe DeMauro pretended some fake conversation with me behind my back to people and pretended and repeated about statistics. I'm saying that not just because he looks just like the Aaron Mate. And he brought up the name Aaron involved. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. I never saw Aaron in my life. He just walked by me one time. They tried to make fake exceptions. These are the people involved increasingly with predicate acts on my street and with the intelligence on parallel streets. But it's also because they're victims slash hyper victims, they're repeating fake things of others. I'm not going to get in conversation with them. They already faked conversations of interbranch. They already recorded themselves how they are used as investigators. They are used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. Increasingly, the state of Connecticut corrections offices and judicial branch offices has roles interstates with foreign and domestic military. The Eastern States Narcotics Drugs Task Force has roles with people named tomorrow involved with drugs and medicines, crimes and other sexual, medical, and overt criminal enterprises, people on Valley Crest Street and Morgan Circle in Wethersfield, which those are conjunctions to Route 3. And they said, and Heather Hansen, recorded capacity demonstration firm, there's a Erica Donahue. I never had a word of conversation with her. I don't know her. Never saw her around school in my campus of my life. A house on Route 3, tied to a side entrance to Millwoods Park. The side entrances are increasingly involved with former mayors from Wethersfield, too, at the same time, and their family members in conjunctions to them and to that, involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and their confessions about being with sexual circles, too. So if people try to say, I don't know them, they made all these personal confessions, then they pretend you had a conversation. I never had a conversation with Danielle Perron. She tried to make it look like other with a Mark Violet at her house with her brother, and people I don't even know the names of. And their neighbors are increasingly involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart. They're recorded, and a whole bunch of people tied to them, recorded into a Kerr family and Perron family are one of the ones with spots next to Fox Connecticut News. Also with these Mendez police family members and their educators, and ones with the name Domain and their educators, also involved with predicate acts on my street through time, with people from other areas, like the Domain family, involved with some Jewish theme syntax, and repeated about sexual things about my neighbor, my algebra class teacher, who also has roles with falsified police reports, and acting tied to it, as having been affected by the police forms in the courts, planting evidences planting collusion /S2 with other countries and their family members with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and the news, and all sides of criminal and civil cases, putting the same sequence shifts, same fake motivations for why and how they're using other people's names, describing things, answer questions, all truths used for lies too, used to screen lies. So in other words, there are threats because of technology for us. In other words, the suburbs were designed tactically denatured to cause negative value nature progressions, acts in nature, and needs for people to overcome those. So with only means provided, only means permitted, more and more, is that people's self-value rules with criminal insidiousness nature as a means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts in nature. Specifically, for example, to build styles, needs, and natures who will jump into other people's conversations with like economic variable, pretending economics means what they don't. In other words, anyone wants to jump up and say, get a job to the people of New York City. When we have seen rap videos to see the buildings that people stacked upon, and forget about it, what I caught them doing with the campuses A through Z. Here, Anthony, vaccines. Please, Judge Napolitano, do what's right. Get the Wethersfield police. Get me out for fake conversations with them and get them on paper, one name and sequence. Tell them to stop being cowards and bring in their family members, too, within the Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, and Connecticut District Court, involved with the F.B.I., too, other agencies. There are people with CIA syntax, as ones involved with the Russians, Ukraine, Korea, Italy. Judge Joe DeMoro said he has syntax regarding Italy. Recorded capacity demonstrate confirmed collusions with people from off my campuses involved with predicate acts with facts between campuses. A bunch of people at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and Central Connecticut State University have roles with, I believe it was this year, there was a house at the corner of Fair Lane Drive and Carriage Hill Drive that was involved with a home break-in and narratives regarding it, and people with Two Rod Highway and Town Line Drive, junctions to that and to that. Those same people had roles with that same corner when I was a kid, with home break-ins in my area, and with confessions tied to it. Joe DeMoro said that the police caught them after they broke a window in my backyard with Heather Hansen and Joe DeMoro. But then they said that they were jogging. And then he told me that over the phone. See, they hid what I recorded on and off campuses connected. He has rules with a Mr. Pruzzi that kids and adults, when I was a kid and then I was an adult at Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut, they have rules with educators I never had at my campuses involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. And Mr. Pruzzi, I never had any conversation with him. He tried to make one exception to make it look other. Told me to do a Mace of a Joe DeMoro. Increasingly, that was collusions with people with a former Mayor Gold. Increasingly, a former Mayor Gold has collusions with people at Wethersfield Parks and Rec, involved with drugs and medicines crimes with kids, and people with whiting forensics involved with it, and state police families interstates, involved with also a guy who said he was said to my speech class, I never had a personal conversation with him, said he was a partner of a Detective Dylan years ago. A Detective Dylan and that guy have been planting evidence his roles, collusion /S, and with predicate acts on all sides of my house. There's an Inspector Mike refusing to identify himself legitimately. Interbranch have been forging and switching names. They put fake conversations with me with the other officers. In other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence. Intercampuses, intercities, multiple police departments involved with these Mendez police. And the Britain Superior Court with some more sexual and medical offenders of kids or work criminal enterprise. These are people with differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes. They are incapable of thinking too, because how they get into sick campuses. Let me get them. Follow mandated law. Follow mandated law. Get the Constitution on a bridge. There's a policy.